Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everybody, depending on where you are. We are today having to delve into one of the most fascinating and mysterious topics known to humankind. We're going to be talking about the afterlife. Is there something beyond our mortal existence? Our guest today is someone who has been on a captivating journey to explore the enigmatic realm. Elizabeth Entin, a skeptic and cultural Jew, began her pursuit of the unknown after passing of her father, seeking evidence of the afterlife and paranormal activity. This is the author of the insightful book WTF Just Happened, where she shares her experience as a science skeptic, exploring grief, healing, and the evidence of an afterlife. She also hosts her own thought-provoking podcast, WTF Just Happened, all about the afterlife, no woo, which further delves into these intriguing subjects. With a keen interest in uncovering the truth and an impressive array of credentials, Liz is the perfect guest to guide us through the captivating conversation about the afterlife and get us the answers that we want to know. So, anyway, here we go. Liz, I'm so excited to have you here today. This is a good topic.
Great. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. Let's jump right in. So, just so everyone knows, what got you, interested in afterlife? I know your father passed away. Tell us the story about that. What happened? Why?
So that was pretty much why. My very first thought when we found out he was moving to hospice was, and I didn't actually think this logically, but it popped into my mind, is there any way to turn back time and do something where I could bring him to a time in the future when medicine is significantly better? And it wasn't like, oh, I can actually go do this the way, let me talk to another doctor. I mean, I had my logical wits about me, but it was just one of those kind of deep grief fleeting thoughts. And then my next thought was, well, maybe it is possible because it's always in science fiction and so much of science fiction comes true. If you look at science fiction from, say, the 50s, 60s, it's practically our lives today
I
in many
practically look at
ways.
science fiction almost every day, and I'm going like, I had my flip phone. We've got the microwave. So yeah, I hear where you're coming from on that. Um,
Right.
so
So
so you're saying like some of the movies you look at like Poltergeist. I hope that doesn't come true, but
I hope that doesn't either. Well,
so what is some of like the like for you some of the more compelling evidence that you like ever had that made you go, you know what, there just might be an afterlife? What's
right. Well, I guess right after that, the next thought, after I read some about time relativity, my next thought was what led me to what I think was the most remarkable, compelling evidence I found, which was I thought if we lived once, why could, and our brain creates consciousness, why could that not happen again and create another person, even if not me? So that's what led me to find what initially I thought was the most compelling evidence, which is the research of Dr. Jim Tucker and Dr. Ian Stevenson. They are child psychiatrists at the University of Virginia. And Dr. Ian Stevenson's actually passed away, and Dr. Jim Tucker has taken over his role. And they're
okay?
child psychiatrists and they're professors of psychiatry at the University of Virginia. And they study cases of kids with past life memories. And they're just logical. They don't talk about karma or any of the more spiritual aspects. They just check the children's reports, then they go investigate and match up the cases. And some of the cases just, they're so remarkable.
So tell me
And
about one of the cases because this fascinates me. I want to believe.
oh, yeah, who doesn't, right? I'd say the most famous case, and this is apparently the case that convinced Dr. Tucker that something genuine's going on. And if you Google it, it's the James Leininger case. And it's a little boy who was about 3 years old. And they say you basically children have the memories until they're about 5, unless there be some other reason for them to keep them, if like their family writes them down or reminds them. And he started having nightmares all the time where he kept screaming like James in a like little man goes down, plane on fire, little man goes down. And they found Dr. Jim Tucker. And what Dr. Tucker first noticed is that he kept playing out this plane crash the way children play out actual trauma, as if something had really happened, which is very different than fears or nightmares or imagination. And just, it's a very complicated case, but I'll give some of the highlights. One example was he knew all these details. They took him to a plane museum and he knew all this stuff that he could not have known. And then he had these 3 dolls, these like army man dolls, and one had, I believe, red hair, one had black hair, and one had blonde hair, and he gave them each a name. And then down the line, very complicated, remarkable case, they end up tracking down his old army buddies or Air Force buddies. Everything's checking out, and he meets these old men, you know, now gray or bald, but he sees pictures, and he'd named his dolls after each one of these men, and the hair color had matched. And he met these elderly people, and they like traded memories of his time in the Air Force. It was just insane.
Like while he was 5 years old, the older gentleman actually talked to him, and they talked about stories about back in the day.
Yes. I don't know exactly to what extent, but aspects of being in the Air Force and aspects of the plane crashing matched up. He knew stuff about flying a plane that that I guess he'd even been told was wrong, but then they checked and it turned out it was accurate. And then he met the army buddies, and the hair colors of the dolls matched. And I don't know to the extent they shared memories of the equal, you know, you meet a friend from high school and you're sharing memories. I don't know if it was that good, but it was good enough that the men believed.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, like, now, did he grow out of these memories? Like you said, up until age 5, did he actually grow out of them, or does he still remember?
I think he still remembers because it became such a famous case. So it's like, you probably don't remember that much from when you're 3 years old, but if there's like this big event and your family keeps talking about it, you're gonna remember it, you know? So I think it's more like that. But in general, most children don't keep the memories, or they don't stay as emotionally attached to them. If
Now,
they
in
do
the research,
remember.
in the research that you've done, what are some of the things that you've actually found where you go like, okay, that was these people's experience. I'm going to do my own stuff and explore the afterlife. What have you found that has convinced you and stopped you from being a skeptic?
Well, I still consider myself a skeptic, and in that I evaluate everything. I wouldn't say I don't just believe things, and I also can't say I'm 100% convinced, but I think there's a preponderance of evidence that I can draw a really reasonable conclusion that there most likely is an afterlife. I used to think there was 0 chance. I mean, it wasn't even an option. It was like the tooth fairy. So from the stuff that I've had the most personal experience with, I'd say mediumship, because that's something I have access to. I can't just email Dr. Tucker and say, can I accompany you on your research? I hope one day I can do something like that. But mediumship, I can actually book readings and attend group readings. And some of the mediums have known things they absolutely could not have known. And I take precautions. I give a fake name. I had friends pay. I'd use a VPN when booking. And not all of them, but some of them, I was just like blown away. And then I started attending events with one of the organizations that does the science-based protocols to test and certify them. And so getting to know those mediums and befriend some of them. So I know them personally, and I've grown to trust them, and I know they're not delusional, and I know that they're not deceptive. And before I got to know them, I'd have readings with them, and I've watched them read other people. And I know, that how, Forever Family will, for example, put together their retreats where I know the mediums cannot have access to who the people are because I'm helping with that. And then they'll know all this information. So I know it's really remarkable. So that's part of some of the most compelling evidence I've experienced.
Absolutely. I've got Marianne has actually said Sarah used to start sentences with back when I was a grown-up when she was a toddler.
Wow.
Now, that to me is pretty profound. I don't know why Marianne hasn't mentioned this before. But
Oh, sorry. I was going to say there's a consistency to that. Actually, I mean, this in Dr. Tucker's cases, and then I started just reading on random blogs that's a consistency. Kids will almost all say when I was a grown up or when I was big, and they do it until they're about 4 or 5,
And then
and they usually then.
do they just forget, or what happens?
I think most just don't even remember saying that. Or I have a friend who also is very fascinated by all of this, and he remembers when he was a kid. I think a lot of it just doesn't, you sort of push it away because it doesn't make sense. I think some people forget, and some they just say, oh, that must have been kid fantasy, because he remembers a conversation he had with his sister, and he was like, oh, I remember when I used to be big, and she was saying the same thing, and he just was baffled. He kept trying to think about it. He's like, wait, why do I remember being big? Because I'm small now, and you get bigger. You don't get big and get smaller. And he couldn't figure this out, but he kept remembering, but I remember being big. But the memories weren't as strong as James Leininger. Like, most of us have this one memory that doesn't necessarily make sense. Like, I'm looking back at my childhood and I can place one like that. But they're more visceral. Like, my parents had this heating pad, and I was like 4 years old, and I was terrified of it. And every time I saw it, something about the fabrics kept reminding me of like being ill and dying and deathbeds and hospitals. And I was like, I didn't know anything about that. I wasn't told. And then I turned about 7. I was like, that's so weird. Why was I scared of this heating pad when I was 5? That's such a weird thing to be
That
scared
is
of.
very,
But
very weird. So
yeah.
what do you think the afterlife actually looks like, or is that part of your research at all? Do you look at it and say there's the white light, or we're just floating around as ghosts or poltergeists? What do you get out of your research?
Ooh, I mean, this is so speculative. The only part that's a little bit tangible are people who have near-death experiences. And then mediums get information, but I'll give my thoughts on that in a second. So near-death experiences, that's tangible, but it's people who don't go very far, because otherwise they couldn't come back to talk
Uh-huh.
about it. And the consistency there is they tend to see a white light or a tunnel, and they go through a life review and they see deceased loved ones, and they just feel this intense nothing but love.
Hmm.
And mediums of the afterlife, when they communicate with spirits, is just filled with love. I I don't know. I can't back that part up, because I can't believe it is just so pure without complexity of like some dark and some light. That would just be my guess. And I would guess maybe when the mediums are getting the communication, they're just experiencing the love and growth, because, you know, think about it. If you haven't talked to like someone you really care about in a long time and you see them, you're just like filled with like love and excitement, or like, yeah, you're not thinking of all the grievances. I mean, this is, there's just so much speculation with this. I'd say the only evidence are near death experiences, and we just get
How
that
do you
small period of time where someone is in the process of just starting to transition to it.
how do you tell the difference between with the mediums that we're talking about? Because you say they've got the real goods, right? How do you know the real mediums from the guys that are doing the fake mediumship or fake seances? What's the difference?
So I would say, in terms of a reading, if you give a fake name and fake identity, and you're on the phone with them, forgetting, like, I'm not even talking about the scientific certifications, because no one who's cheating could pass that. But if you're just getting a reading yourself, and then they say they know things, like, I'm sensing of a father on the other side, he's with, did his brother pass too? Sometimes I'll get like names. Are you doing this for work? One medium once was like, right when I'd gone to a Forever Family Foundation event and had come back, and he had nothing to do with Forever Family. He's like,
Hmm.
did you just go away with like friends and family for 4 days? And I see you going to the airport and flying JetBlue, which I had. And so they're getting these factual information, and you're sitting there sometimes on the phone, so they can't even read your face, and using a Google Voice number, and you're saying yes, no, yes.
Yeah.
And then how are they doing that? Versus some I've had that I think there's ones that are intentionally fake, and then there's ones that just, they probably mean well, maybe they can do it a little bit, and they really aren't very evidential. So I think a lot of the ones that are kind of
Okay.
fake are not intentionally fake. And then the fraudulent ones, I mean, I went to a fraudulent one, and she was just saying very general things, and I went along with it because I wanted the
You want to get
experience
out
for
of
my
there.
book, but
So when you go to talk to different mediums and different
Mhm.
people who are into the afterlife, do you find there's like a cultural difference between what people see and feel for the afterlife and the experiences that the different cultures have, or no?
Oh, what do you mean exactly? I'm sorry, I
Like,
don't
is there a
understand.
difference between afterlife for people who are Buddhist and people who are, um, Christian, or people who are Muslim, or
Oh,
people who are African
got it.
religions?
There doesn't seem to be at all, no. I mean, when mediums get information, they don't seem to notice much difference, except the person they're communicating with will maybe bring up cultural references, so they know it's them. And then near-death experiences, there really aren't differences. Then
So,
most people who were of a certain religion, when they have a near-death experience, they come back not necessarily, maybe they love the culture of that religion, but they might not apply it to how they understand afterlife anymore. Not everybody, but I'd say almost everybody.
so what do you want people who are watching right now to think and believe and come away with after we're done with this conversation? What's the message that you have?
The main message is that there is a vast body of valid scientific research and data on this topic. It is not all belief based, it is not all woo. There are even two researchers who've won Nobel Prizes, for example, and worked with Stephen Hawking, who are studying aspects of the brain that they think might be able to quantum entangle with consciousness that survives after bodily death and it's outside our body. One's called Dr. Stuart Hameroff, and the other is Sir Roger Penrose. And then there's a whole department at the University of Virginia of serious researchers studying this. And that's just a small portion. There's the Windbridge Institute, where Dr. Julie Beischel and her husband, Mark Bacuzzi, also serious researchers. She was a pharmacologist, and they're studying mediums from an evidence-based perspective. I don't think people should jump into drawing any conclusions, but I think check the research. And if you dismiss this as woo, or just say, oh, no one, this is all just belief based and people who haven't examined. There's real, serious, solid evidence, and it's worth investigating.
That is, I want to believe. I want to come up on that, belief scale. I'm not saying that there's not. I'm like the people who go like, I want some serious belief, right? And I just,
Mhm.
I hear where you're coming from, and I'd love to see it all come together. I'll tell you what. I don't know that we're going to come up with all the answers that we want today, but I do want to do one thing with you before we go, and I'm going to ask you just some questions for this or that. I'm going to give you two choices. You choose one or the other. You can't choose neither or both.
Oh
So
no. Okay.
super simple questions. Let's start with, and that it doesn't. There's no right or wrong. It's what do you think of as soon as I say the words? Okay. For
Okay.
example, like near-death experiences or past life regression.
Near death experience.
Okay. What about guardian angels or spirit guides?
Ooh, neither of spirit guides. Spirit
Yeah.
guides. Like, oh, those
Now,
kids are more woo than me.
have you ever experienced spirit guides yourself?
No, I
Okay.
don't know. I mean, I've experienced interesting vibrations doing some meditations. I don't know how I'd ever jump to a conclusion they're spirit guides. So
Gotcha. Yeah, how about reincarnation or single afterlife realm, like heaven?
reincarnation.
Okay. Now, look, I have a question about reincarnation.
Yes.
The fact that we're reincarnation, do we have a finite number of souls, or does somebody somewhere keep making more and more souls and they keep coming back to Earth? Because the population's been getting bigger and bigger. So how's that working, you think?
I don't know. I can't even, that's pure philosophy. I would guess that there would have to be a start at some point to individual consciousness,
Okay.
which, like I said, the work could be for souls, but population getting bigger. I don't know if that would be more made. Also, why couldn't they've been around for just for so many times? They could have been a different iteration of the Big Bang and Big Crunch. I mean,
That
this
could
I
be, right?
have no doubt this couldn't be our first Big Bang, Big Crunch of planet of solar systems with conscious,
Gotcha.
intelligent beings. That when you look into all eternity, so they could
Well,
have maybe we've done this for gazillions of years.
It
So
was possibility, right? How about out of body
mhm.
experiences or lucid dreaming?
Probably out of body.
Yeah, telepathy or
Yeah.
clairvoyance.
Um, Telepathy.
Okay. Now, I've had people on the show about this before, but astral projection or remote viewing.
Oh, remote viewing.
Yeah, yeah. There's been evidence on both sides that it works and doesn't work. Where do you fall on remote viewing?
I think it works. I actually just had a remote viewer who was part of the government-based Stargate program on my most recent podcast. I think it doesn't work for everybody. So, and most people aren't as good as the few professionals. Although they say everybody can do it if you do this certain, you learn these skills. They believe it's a learned skill. And I did take a class and I was accurate one time, but I've never been accurate again. So,
Okay,
yeah,
we're gonna have to talk about that some more. How about premonitions or intuition?
premonitions.
Okay, you believe karma or fate?
Ooh, I don't like either. I guess
Right?
karma.
You don't like either, huh? All right. Well,
Mm,
this has been like an amazing conversation. I could probably keep talking to you about this for the rest of the day. And for people that want to
same.
get in touch with you, let's give them a way to do that through your website, WTFJustHappened.net. And also they can find you on Instagram at WTF underscore just underscore happened. And there is a final underscore, guys. So if you want Instagram, make sure you use that final underscore, and TikTok at WTF underscore just underscore happened underscore. And that is a 0, not an O, happened underscore 0. So I'm going to leave the easy one on the screen for people to be able to reach you and say hello and ask you more questions, listen to your podcast. I super appreciate you being on, and I'm gonna have to sing you some more questions.
Please do. I had so much fun being on. This was such a fun, great start to my day and great conversation.
Excellent. We'll see you next time, and goodbye, everybody.